Well, the spiritual truth that I'm working with today is one that we touched on last week, and that is this. What you are looking for, you are looking with. What you are looking for, you are looking with. So in other words, if you're looking for love, don't come all scrunched up with a laundry list of your past disappointments to the next date you have. Come with only love in your heart. Come with expectation of happiness in your heart. If you're looking for adventure, don't come with that idea that, oh, I can never find anything to do around here. There's no fun around here. Come with a memory of the last great adventure that you had in your heart. If you're looking for a raise, don't come to the table with all the resentments. Oh, I've worked so hard for this company or for this department, and nobody ever paid me what I was deserving, and I put in overtime, and nobody ever appreciated it. Don't come with that attitude. Come with the attitude of, oh, I remember the last generous thing my department did or my boss did in my life. What you're looking for, you're looking with. And it's a fundamental concept of this book that we've been doing called The Art of Abundance, the 10 Rules for a Prosperous Life. It's also a foundational belief in the teachings of Science of Mind. The book was written by a retired Science of Mind minister named Dennis Merritt Jones. And last Sunday, we spent a lot of time setting the scene for exploring these 10 rules of abundance. And we recognized that he broke these rules down into 5 categories of teachings. And the categories are the premise of the rule, the problem with the rule, why don't we embrace it so effortlessly, the principle, the spiritual principle behind the rule, the practice, and the payoff. So again, it's the premise, the problem, the principle, the practice, and the payoff. We started with rule number 1 last week, which was be one with all life. And the nutshell version of this premise is, as we become aware, and when I say aware, I mean aware both with your mind and your body, that we are one with everything in our universe, that's when abundance will show up. It will actually, you don't have to do anything, it'll just start showing up in your life. Simple, when we recognize we are one with all life, abundance, prosperity will begin to show up in our life. See, and then we even got to the problem last week. And the problem is we think we have to struggle to survive. The problem is that not enoughism dominates the majority of our thoughts and our behaviors. More on the premise and the problem is on your YouTube channel. Your YouTube channel is on the front of your bulletin if you want to look deeper into that. So let's move on to, we're still on rule number 1. Let's move on to the principle. Prosperity of any type begins with an unformed substance of all possibility. Prosperity for any type, whether it's a new car or a new relationship or new health or a new creative project, it all starts in unformed substance of all possibility. Now, we've talked about that before. It's a very basic Science of Mind belief. But just as a review, close your eyes for a moment and picture a giant meadow that has no beginning and no end. And in this meadow, all you see is quivering energy. Can you see the quivering energy in your meadow? You just see it quivering right now. That quivering energy only takes on form. You can open your eyes now because I'm as pretty. Your quivering energy only takes on form as a result of your desire. It can only take on form when you create a mold for it. And that mold can be a condition such as a healthier body or a thing such as a new car, a house, or a plane ride somewhere. In that way, you are the source of your own good. You are co-creating with Spirit your heart's desire. Abundance is your birthright. No matter where you live, what circumstances you were brought up in, Jones uses the example of living on a waterway in Florida in the Gulf of Mexico. And he said in this waterway, he noticed as he looked out of his apartment window, he noticed that the water was holding up all of the boats. It didn't give more water or hold up better to the big boats, the prestigious boats. The waterway was holding up all the boats. It didn't matter. It didn't support the privileged boats, but it supported the kayaks as well as the yachts, the tugboats as well as the rowboats. The water was there for everybody. It gave equal rights and access to the owner of the boat. The owner of the boat is the one who decides how big his vessel is. The water doesn't decide that. Only the owner of the boat. It is the owner of our mind that decides how abundant you and I are going to be. And the abundant mind is one that understands that we are one with the universe. Within the premise is the caution to separate and understand the difference between abundance and prosperity. I never knew this. There's a difference between abundance and prosperity. Abundance is defined as extremely plentiful, more than you could ever want. That's what abundance is. An over-sufficient quantity and supply. An overflowing fullness is what abundance is. In other words, abundance is the field that you just visited, the field of quivering energy that is available to all of us, no matter what, waiting for your mold. Prosperity, on the other hand, is the effect. It's the result of an abundant mind or an abundant heart. And again, let's be careful not to limit prosperity to just money. Although we want you to have all the money you want to have, we're not looking for poverty here. A vow of poverty is not what Science of Mind is all about. But prosperity is so much more than that. It's also the abundance of talent and relationships and your inner peace, your good health, and the time to enjoy them all. Abundance is the cause principle of more than enough, and prosperity is the extreme and exquisite effect. So abundance the cause, prosperity the effect, the result of your abundance consciousness. Now remember, Jones has broken the rule down into 5 categories: the premise, the problem, the principle, the practice, and the payoff, which is helpful because without the practice, the other 4 simply become information for us. And what you and I are looking for is transformation. We don't care about the information. We care about what it does for us and the people around us. Simply put, the practice of mindfulness is where your body and your mind sync up. They're at the same place. I don't know about you, but my body is always often in one place, but my mind is somewhere else. Mindfulness is that syncing of the body and the mind. And when you do that and you connect with your higher power, with God, with spirit, with love, with abundance itself, the sky's the limit. So after exploring the premise, the problem, the principle, and the practice, what's next? It's the payoff. And the payoff for principle number 1, the payoff for any kind of abundance or prosperity is freedom. It's the freedom, having the ability to do what you want, when you want, where you want to do it. That's what abundance and prosperity is. It's not having $1 million in the bank. It's having the ability to say, yes, tomorrow I want to go to Paris and I'm going to go. Or tomorrow I'm going to get my tires fixed, and you go and get them fixed. That's what prosperity and freedom is. And it may come without money. Mother Teresa had no money, none, not a nickel to rub together. But she could get on a plane and go anywhere at any time she wanted. All she had to do was to call up Delta or American or United. I doubt she called Spirit, but she could have called Spirit. And she just would say, this is Mother Teresa and I want to go to Rome today. Okay, Mother, plane tickets at the counter. See, all because she knew she was one with the universe. So let's go on to number 2. Be aware you live in an ever-expanding universe. Be aware you live in an ever-expanding universe. Now this is tricky because sometimes we think of the universe as our planet. And we actually, what we're seeing right now, you and I, is our planet is shrinking because of climate change. It's not expanding. But planets are geography, and that's not what we're talking about. The universe is the sum of everything that exists in the cosmos. including time and space itself. It is simply energy. That is what the universe is. It is energy. But more importantly, for us to remember is that energy cannot be created and it cannot be destroyed. It just is. It can only be transformed from one form to another form. But those are just facts, and those facts about the planet and transforming and energy and all that, that's explained by Edwin Hubble and Albert Einstein much better than I could do it. But those facts only matter if they make us happier, if they make us more generous of spirit and heart in our lives, if they lead us to our own divinity. So how do we use this information that brings us closer to a heaven on earth that Jesus talked about? We experience the expansion of the universal energy based simply on our consciousness. That's how we experience it. Again, we pull that energy out of that meadow into form by our desire. There's a story in Eastern teachings about a disciple who goes to the master, and the disciple says to the master, please give me a word of wisdom. Could you tell me something that would guide me through my days? Well, it was the master's day of silence. So he grabbed a pad and he wrote the word awareness on the pad, and he gave it back to the disciple. And the disciple saw it and said, well, you know, this is a little brief, a little more. Could you expand on it a bit? So the master took back the pad and he wrote the words awareness, 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 awareness equals awareness. Yes, but what does that mean? The master took the pad back and wrote awareness, awareness, awareness equals awareness. In other words, let's not make this so difficult and so complicated. Awareness can lead us to freedom and to prosperity. One of the things that will help us to remember mindfulness and awareness, both are great, are not the same thing. Mindfulness brings us to the present moment so we can realize our oneness with life. But awareness is the laser light that focuses on what's going on in that moment. Starting a day with mindfulness practice can set up your awareness to evaluate whether life's giving you something life-affirming in any given situation or whether it's life-defeating in every situation. If we know that we're one with God, and we've spent a moment contemplating this each day, it's easier to speak up when somebody, when you experience an injustice, because it flies in the face of the oneness with all life that you've just contemplated in your life. If we know we're part of an expanding universe, not as observers, but as participants, we can keep our own values straighter and resist any temptation to gossip and greed and dishonesty and low self-esteem. Those simply go away when we realize we're one with life. Basically, the intention of this rule number 2 is to transcend what he calls the average thinking mind. The average thinking mind. That thinking mind that suggests scarcity is real. We can transcend the average thinking mind by being fully present and aware in each moment that we live in a land of pure potentiality. If we're willing to remember every moment of every day that there is a meadow out there that has got quivering energy waiting for our mold, if we could remember that every single day, we would be amazing people. But honestly, potentiality is nothing until it is realized, actualized, and utilized. Remember, Jones broke down each rule into the premise, the problem, the principle, the practice, and the payoff. We've just been discussing the premise, so let's move on to the problem, which is this. Too often, the focus of our attention is misplaced. It's glued to what we believe is missing. For most of us, from the moment we get up in the morning until the time our head hits the pillow at night, most of us conduct our lives on autopilot. The problem with autopilot living is that the habit energy kicks in and we go unconscious. We're not thinking anymore. we've lost our ability to be aware. We're focusing on the struggle of just getting by or of making it through another day. In other words, what we put our attention to grows. We don't want to grow problems in our relationship, our careers, our financial lives, or our communities. The principle. Jones asked us to look at Mother Nature to understand the law of expansion. And he uses an ear of corn, a large ear of corn. And he said in a large ear of corn there are 800 kernels. And if you took those kernels, those 800 kernels, and made them into seeds, you would plant them, and then you would have 800 corn stalks that are producing 2 more kernels. Those 2 more kernels then will result in having 1,600 new kernels available to plant. If you planted 1,600 new kernels, what you would end up with was 2,560,000 kernels, and so on. So you can kind of see how this law of expansion works. It just keeps expanding. Moving on to the practice. Norman Vincent Peale once wrote, "The more you lose yourself in something bigger than you are, the more energy you'll have." And you know, when I first started this church, I invested most of my waking mind into something bigger than I was, developing this church. And while sometimes I was exhausted, I was always exhilarated. For those of you who don't have the book, I have prepared the practices for rule number 1 and rule number 2. I've written them out. They're on that long table in the lobby if you're in church. I'm sorry if you're not in church. If you're not in church, buy the book. It's a good book. But I've prepared those, and I wanted you to take them home and just play with them a little bit. They're the 2 practices for rule number 1 and rule number 2. They take a few minutes. If you don't have a full 20 minutes, don't worry. Give it 5 minutes, those practices. Even if you just read I just read the practices, and I felt different about my ability to be prosperous and have abundance in my life. The payoff. The universe is constantly conspiring for your good. And when you're available to consciously participate in the process, you live in an expanding universe, which can only do for you what it can do through you. When we're willing to take this information and begin to work with it in our lives. See, I'm sad that we haven't been able to do as many classes during COVID, because that's where we really dive into these concepts. We're not doing that right now. We'll start up again. But right now, you have the opportunity to take this work and begin to workshop it. Do it as your own individual. Sit at your kitchen table and do those practices. Because here's what I promise you. Your life will change. You know, one of the themes of Science of Mind for years, since Ernest Holmes started it, is change your thinking, change your life. But we can't be changing our thinking without knowledge. And that's why it's so important to begin to do the work in addition to coming on Sunday. I'm so glad you're all here. It makes a difference for us that we have people in the church. But I'm grateful for those of you who are taking care of yourself, who are saying, whoa, we're in a little uptick, I'm going to step back a little bit. I'm just glad that you're online. Phil, Nelda, Joanna, First Lady Donna, Sarah, Lucy, we're all glad you're here too. So if you will take this message into prayer, let us prepare ourselves, knowing that the presence of abundance of God is right where we are. That I can co-create with Spirit a life beyond my wildest dreams. I give thanks for that. I release this word into the law, and together we say, and so it is.